Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we are going to take a look at another of these Takara Tomy Jurassic World figures. This figure was acquired thanks to my good friend John Sakulo helping me out to order some of these figures off of Amazon Japan. It's a little complicated at times to order from Amazon Japan, and it's a little bit cheaper, I would say, to order from there than it would be to purchase from eBay. So I try to get them as often as I can from there as opposed to eBay, but they're still fairly reasonably priced at times on eBay, so that's probably where I will link you guys in the description after the video is over if you'd like to order one, because again, it's just a little easier. It's really quite complicated to order from Amazon Japan, which is why I go through him. But again, we are looking at the Indoraptor here, and it looks super cool. Really nice looking sculpt, it seems. I'm a big fan of these Takara Tomy Jurassic World figures, so I'm really excited to see this one now, the Indoraptor. As far as the box art goes, we have an image of the Indoraptor right here on the front, as well as another image down here of the Indoraptor actually from the film, and then the Jurassic World logo up here. Very similar images as well. And then again over here we have a image that shows quite a few of the other figures that are in the line, which I do have quite a few of, but not all. And then over here, an image of the Indoraptor, kind of showing off some of the articulation that is included. And then the Indoraptor over here as well. And as you can see, the packaging is pretty much bursting open right here. So I'm going to just open this up, get our Indoraptor out right now. And here is our Indoraptor. Really quite cool looking, honestly. I'm not a huge fan of the pose of the figure. I don't think I have the legs positioned correctly either, as it's... There we go, that looks a little bit better. I'm not a giant fan of the pose, but it's not too bad. But the actual sculpting and detailing here straight away looks really quite nice, honestly, as far as like the fine detailing goes, which is something that's fairly common with Takara Tomy, as they usually do provide some really highly detailed sculpts with their figures. Not all the time. There are a few, I guess you could say, duds as far as the detailing aspect goes, but as far as like the last few years and the figures that Takara Tomy has pumped out, they've really provided some beautifully sculpted figures, and this Indoraptor definitely looks to be another one of those. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead, get a closer look at this guy right now. So starting up here at the head sculpt of the Indoraptor, you can see some really nice texturing to the face, the head area, and a beautiful structure in general to the head of the Indoraptor. Some more nice detailing up here on the top of the head. You can see the nostrils are sculpted out there on the tip of the snout. You can also see the eyes are painted with a reddish coloration and given a black pupil. They look pretty good, honestly. They don't look sloppy or anything. They look like they're fairly decently placed. He has kind of a squinty look to his face there, almost a little bit of a menacing type of a look. Maybe he's definitely up to something, I would say, as far as the appearance to the eyes, but it looks quite nice. Definitely a very good paint job on the eyes. And then you do have an articulated jaw, which opens quite wide. You can actually open it even wider if you would really like, but then it starts to look a little ridiculous. Inside the mouth, you can see that the tongue is sculpted out and painted in there. It's been given a nice reddish coloration. Also has a bit of a gloss coat to it, and you can see the teeth are all individually sculpted and painted. And although the teeth on the underside here, the lower jaw, look pretty good for the most part, I'm not a huge fan of the teeth on the upper jaw here. They're just really bulky. They just look unreasonably bulky on this one. So I'm not exactly a huge fan of that. But once we start to move back here into the neck region of the Indoraptor, you can see some really nice sculpt and detail to the top of the head and the neck area, as you have kind of like that almost armored type of a look, like a scoot-like look that runs down the back of the Indoraptor. Same deal here in the neck region. The skin texture continues to look quite nice, very reminiscent of the Indoraptor from the film. You can see the throat down here and quite a bit of creasing and everything in the throat. Really nicely sculpted out in that area. Coming back here into the arm, you have that nice slender and long arm like you see on the Indoraptor in the films. The hands are sculpted out quite nicely. Pretty similar pose to the arms and hands on each side, but ever so slightly different, it seems. The nails are sculpted out and painted with a grayish coloration, but they are also pretty bulky overall. but not near as bad as the teeth. They still look pretty decent. And then coming back into the stomach region, you can see more really nice skin texture. The legs are articulated, so we can kind of move the legs back and get a better idea of what the actual skin texture looks like and everything. I'm actually surprised there's like a light gray coloration that's been added here to the underside that actually makes that detail pop quite nicely. And that is something that you do see on the Indoraptor in the film, so I'm really surprised to see that they had actually captured that here with a light grayish coloration on the underside, because it seems most times companies that create an Indoraptor seem to forget that little area. I'm not a huge fan, I can say, of the paint scheme of this, with kind of like that dark red and that somewhat awkward looking yellowish sort of. It's more of like an off-white stripe that runs down the course of the body. Like the black and everything, of course, looks really good. They did a good job of capturing the coloration of the eyes, as the Indoraptor has like reddish eyes in the film, but I'm not at all a fan of that stripe that runs down along the side of the body. I really feel like that's just, it doesn't look accurate to the film, and it's just not very appealing overall. You can see that the thigh sports some really nice musculature, though. Moving down here into the leg, you can see a nice slender and long leg, again, something that is reminiscent of the Indoraptor in Jurassic World. You can see that the foot looks pretty good. We do have that nice sickle claw, and you also see that they are painted as far as the claws and everything go. Nice scoots down the toes. The nails are actually painted really quite nicely with a grayish coloration, and they do include a gloss coat, so they shine pretty realistically. And you can actually see over here on this foot, the further foot, that there is a dew claw present, and it is also painted. So props to Takara Tomy for actually doing that, because so many companies tend to forget the dew claw. And then as we move out the length of the tail, you can see some more of that really nice skin texture. Of course, we do have articulation in the tail, so you have those ball joint, those seams that some people like, some people hate. It just really depends on you. And then over here on the opposing side, you're not going to see too much difference, honestly, on this side in comparison to the previous side, as far as the Indoraptor goes, for like the first half of the body, because the head is pretty much totally straightforward. The arms are almost in the same position, just ever so slightly different. So there's really no difference as far as like the sculpting and detailing aspect on this side in comparison to the opposing side. But once you get back here, you can see that this leg is definitely a much more dramatic positioning in comparison to the previous leg, as this leg obviously is making it appear as though the Indoraptor is walking or running or just creeping along. It's definitely in mid-movement, and you can see that really nicely displayed throughout the sculpt of the leg. That's really the only difference, honestly, on this side, because again, the tail being an articulated tail, it's really up to you how you position it, so there's no difference in that aspect either. But the leg is actually really nicely posed as far as like that walking position, and even though I'm not a huge fan of the pose of the figure, I actually quite like the leg sculpt and everything. I think they did a great job of sculpting out that detailing aspect. Even the curling there in the toes and everything does look really quite nice. And actually, looking at it in this position, I kind of like it now a little more than I did before. The way it's like meant to be positioned with the kind of leg, I think it's supposed to be back like this or something, like it's just sort of making it look like it's running. But actually, if it's up like this and it makes it look like the Indoraptor is just picking its foot up to walk along, I actually like that a lot more. But again, the sculpt on this is really nicely done overall. I definitely am a big fan of the sculpting of this. The paint job, not so much, but either way, it's a really cool Indoraptor from Takara Tomy. Now, as far as articulation goes, we did state that we have the articulation in the jaw. There is no articulation in the arms. We do have articulation in both legs as they move forward and back quite nicely, and then two joints here in the tail, which can allow you to move the tail pretty well, and also swivel the tail if you would really like, so you can move it in, alternate directions, but that wouldn't really make too much sense to do it that way. But as far as the size goes on our Indoraptor, for a length, you are looking at right around the 6¼ inch range, or about a little over 15½ centimeters. The highest point clearly is the tail, and that would also depend on how you position it, but it's about the 3-inch range, or 7½ centimeters. And then to the top of the head, you're looking at about 1½ inch, or 4 centimeters. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, and Robert Muldoon from the Mattel Jurassic World toy line, next to our Takara Tomy Indoraptor. And looking at these guys next to this Indoraptor, you can definitely see that, as per usual, this Indoraptor lands itself in the smaller size range because pretty much all of the Takara Tomy figures are of a smaller size. And this one fits right in, I would say, with pretty much every other Takara Tomy figure. So if you happen to already have any Takara Tomy figure almost, I would say, you've probably already got a pretty good idea of the size. So this Takara Tomy Jurassic World Indoraptor is quite nice, honestly, and I'm really happy to see so many different companies have produced Indoraptor figures, because now that Fallen Kingdom is kind of off in the past, I feel like moving forward, the Indoraptor is probably not going to get near as much love. So it's nice to have had quite a few figures of it already throughout the many different toy lines and figure lines of the Jurassic World franchise. And this one specifically is also really quite nice. I honestly want to buy another one to give it a repaint, to give it a more accurate repaint and a more accurate paint scheme to what we saw in Fallen Kingdom, and I feel like the Indoraptor overall would be really nicely done. The only thing, again, that I'm not a huge fan of with this one would be, I mean, the pose initially I didn't like, but I'm actually really quite warming up to it. But the paint scheme, that's my only real issue, is, well, not even so much the paint scheme, but the paint application, because the colors they chose, as far as that stripe that runs down the course of the body, are not very good, and that is one area of the Indoraptor that you would think you would want to get right, because that's like one of the few areas on the figure of the animal that actually has a little bit of color. So you would really want to nail that aspect as far as the coloration goes, and unfortunately I don't think Takara Tomy has done that here with this Indoraptor. But if we move past the not so great paint job, the actual sculpting aspect of the figure is beautifully done. Very nice, very highly detailed, and quite accurate to the Indoraptor in the film. I think they did a very good job of giving it that kind of creepy look to the body and the appearance to the figure, and that's something that you do see associated to the Indoraptor in Fallen Kingdom. Again, the teeth are a little bit bulkier than I would like, but since kids obviously play with these figures as well, you also don't want to make them really sharp, because then kids would hurt themselves. But again, the bulky teeth and the slight bulkiness to the claws is a little bit of a downside, but it's nothing that's that terrible. Honestly, I don't think it takes away from the figure or anything, not like that paint job does. But again, the sculpt is really, really beautiful. I actually am now really quite warming up to the pose. Initially, I wasn't so sold on it, but I am actually starting to like it quite a bit more now after having taken a nice closer look at it with you guys. And then you also have some really cool articulation, and all of the articulation works really smoothly, really nicely, and allows for a little bit of possibility as far as displaying your figures. So overall, it's a really cool Indoraptor, and something that I definitely recommend if you are interested in picking up, because it's quite nice. But either way, make sure if you are interested, you check the description. I will do my best to find a link to include, probably on eBay. And make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.